Program Analyst for OCS. I want to welcome all grantees to this important webinar on using your LIHEAP performance data to improve benefit determination procedures. As you all know, we have been working with grantees for the last several years to develop procedures to collect and report energy burden data for LIHEAP households. And as I hope you know, the point of that work was not just to collect those data, but to use them to improve LIHEAP targeting. We are excited that grantees have finally reached that point, and we look forward to hearing more from the prize team about some of their findings and recommendations. Please keep in mind that a recording of this webinar will be posted to the Performance Management website as well as the LIHEAP ACF website at a later date. Now, without further ado, I will turn the presentation over to the prize team.
Next slide, please, Michelle. Hi. So today we're going to talk about one way to make use of the performance measures data that you've been collecting and reporting. And the agenda for today's webinar is first, current practice. We're going to review some of the different ways that grantees determine client benefits. If you're not already aware, I'm sure many of you are, if there are 51 grantees, there are 51 different ways to decide what benefits each client receives. Second, we're going to spend some time looking at ways to update the benefit matrix. We'll look at just one example of how the performance data can be used to improve a benefit matrix for a state that we've been working with. And then third, we'll be looking at ways to use client energy bills. We'll be describing the steps for using client energy bills to directly use client energy bills directly for benefit determination. Next slide, Michelle. So our first topic is, what are some of the ways that LIHEAP grantees set client benefit levels? One approach is the benefit matrix approach. In this approach, grantees develop a benefit matrix that's used to assign a benefit to the client. And again, I know that most of you know this, but I'm just trying to walk through this very systematically, because if you're new to the LIHEAP program, you might think that the way you do it is the only way that it's done, but I want to alert you that there are many different ways that grantees do this. So in the benefit matrix approach, the steps include: the client completes an application and reports information that is needed for the eligibility determination and for the benefit matrix. The grantee uses that benefit matrix to assign a benefit to the client. The grantee or sub-grantee pays the benefit to the vendor, and then the vendor applies the benefit toward client bills and returns any unused funds at the end of the year. That's one basic approach that some grantees use for assigning benefits. Next slide, Michelle. The second approach is similar but not exactly the same. This is the benefit maximum approach. These grantees develop a benefit matrix that's used to assign a maximum benefit to the client, but the grantee only pays the benefits that are presented by the client. So the steps in this process include, again, the client completes an application form and reports information needed for eligibility determination and for the benefit matrix. The benefit matrix is used to determine a maximum benefit. The client presents an energy bill for payment. The grantee makes a payment to the vendor for that particular energy bill, and if the benefit maximum has not been reached, the client can present another energy bill for payment later in the year. One thing to know is that when grantees use this approach, they sometimes establish a minimum benefit. So the minimum benefit might be $200. If somebody presents an energy bill for $50, they might go ahead and assign that minimum. But the range might be from $200 to $450, and the client automatically gets $200, but if they bring in $400 worth of bills, they'll get $400 benefit. So Michelle, can you go back one slide to slide 4? So the difference between the straightforward benefit matrix approach and the benefit maximum is, in the benefit matrix approach, the grantee goes ahead, decides what the benefit is, and goes ahead and pays that to the vendor. In the benefit maximum approach, next slide, Michelle, they set a maximum, they pay the bills as they're presented by the client, but they don't make additional payments until the client presents additional bills. I also will tell you that I'm sure that there are several different variations on this. I'm just trying to give you a general idea. Next slide. The third approach is the individualized payment approach. In this approach, the grantee develops a benefit determination procedure that takes into account the client's status, that is, their poverty level and whether or not they're a vulnerable household, and looks at the client's actual energy bills. The steps in that process include, first, the client, again, completes an application and reports information needed for eligibility determination and the benefit matrix. The grantee obtains client energy bills from the vendor, and that can be done at the point in time where the client applies, or it could have been done at the end of the previous LIHEAP season for repeat clients. The grantee uses the client characteristics and the energy bills to assign a benefit amount. The grantee or sub-grantee then pays the benefit to the vendor. The vendor applies the benefit towards the client bills and returns any unused funds at the end of the years. But as you might guess, not every client has 12 months of energy bills or 3 months of energy bills or whatever the approach is being used. And so those grantees, even though they, for many of their households, they're using client actual energy bills as part of the benefit determination process, they will need to develop a backup matrix to assign benefits when client energy bills are not available. So as I understand it, all of the states who use an individualized payment approach also have a benefit matrix approach. That gives you an idea. That gives you an idea of the range of the different ways that grantees set client benefit levels. And what we're going to talk about today is how the data that you've collected for your LIHEAP performance measures can be used to both potentially improve your benefit matrix if you use that approach, or how you could start making use of those data to implement an individualized payment approach if you decide that that would be most beneficial to your clients. If you want to get a better understanding of the full range of ways that LIHEAP grantees set benefit levels, you should take a look at the NCAP publication, State Strategies Based on Household Income, Energy Burden, and Heating Costs. I'm sorry, I marked that that was from March 2017. It's not from March 2017. It was from March 2010. I apologize, but you can follow the link and you can get that on the LIHEAP Clearinghouse. Please note that we are working with NCAT to update that publication, and that's targeted for completion in June of 2017. And what that shows you is I think it's about 10 different grantees and the different approaches that they use for taking account household income, energy burden, and heating costs in setting benefit levels. And that work is being done by Travis and Marisa at the Clearinghouse, and we thank them for their good work on that. And if you're one of the 10 states that they're looking at, they may be calling you up to clarify or to verify that they have your benefit determination procedure characterized correctly. So topic number 2, how can performance data help me to update my benefit matrix? Here's a generic example. What we recommend is that you start by looking, we recommend that you start by just taking a look at your performance data form. We recommend that you look at the average annual total residential energy bill, look at the average annual total LIHEAP benefit per household by main heating fuel, and just ask yourself, does it look like the differences in benefits by main heating fuel are consistent with the differences in energy bills by main heating fuel? So let's say that again. are the differences in the benefits tracking the differences in the energy bills. Now we're going to look at an example that is completely made up. Next slide. So in this case, we have a nice, easy set of numbers to look at. What we see is that for this mythical grantee, there are 6,000 households. They managed to get electric data for all 6,000 of them. The average benefit paid to those clients is $300, and the average total residential energy bill is $1,000. For natural gas, the average benefit is $600 on 2,000. For propane, the average benefit is $900 on 3,000. Next slide, Michelle. So the example slide shows one reasonable approach to benefit assignment. For electric main heat, the benefit is 30% of total expenditures. For natural gas main heat, the benefit is 30% of total expenditures. For propane main heat, the benefit is 30% of total expenditures. That seems like a reasonable thing. This is not the only way to think about benefits, but it is certainly one way to think about benefits. Michelle, can you back up to the previous slide? One of the things that you'll see, though, is that when you add in the electric, it gives you, you're not just looking at the client's main heating fuel. So here they're paying $300 on a $1,000 electric bill for electric main heat households. They're paying $600 on an $800 main heating fuel bill for natural gas, and they're paying $900 on an $1,800 main heating fuel for propane. So if you're just looking at the main heating fuel, you're paying 30% of the electric bill, 75% of the gas bill, and 50% of the propane bill. Well, that's another way of looking at those data, and you might want to be thinking about that a little bit more carefully as you're walking through this. Next slide, and then the following slide. Now, we have actually been talking to Iowa about their benefit matrix, and Christine and John were gracious enough to allow us to present their information and present to you the recommendation that we're making to them for how they might look at changing their benefit matrix. And I think that's very brave of them. People don't like to be singled out, but they have been very gracious, and we all should thank them for giving us this opportunity. So again, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to look at the average annual total residential energy bill, the average annual total LIHEAP benefit, and we'll ask ourselves whether does it look like the differences in the main heating fuel are consistent with the energy bills by main heating fuel. So this is the performance data form that Iowa sent in, on time I will add. And so when you look at this, you see it's not as simple and straightforward as the nice example that we generated without having to take into account reality. So in this case, if you look at the first column, Iowa is on average paying $403. That's line 3. The average benefit for electric main heat households is $403, and their total residential energy bill is about $1,194. For natural gas, they're paying an average benefit of about $465 on an average gas bill of $538, and a total residential energy bill of $1,711. And then they are paying a $538 benefit on an average propane heating bill of $857 and an average total residential energy bill of $2,181. Next slide, Michelle. And so the thing that we looked at is we just looked at what share the benefit was of the total expenditures for that household. For electric main heat households, the benefit covers 34% of their costs, total costs. For natural gas, the benefit covered 27% of their total costs. And for propane, the benefit was 25% of their total costs. Again, this is not the only way to think about benefits, but it's one way, and it's something that we highlighted for Christine and John about what we saw when we looked at their performance data form. How did they get to that? So one important question is, so Iowa is a benefit matrix state, and the question was, how do they get to those payment levels? And this would look very, I think that many of you would find that their benefit matrix looks very similar to ones you might have. First, they have an income factor. So households, they have a point assignment method. They have an income factor that people below 75% of poverty get 8 points. People over between 126 and 175 get 4 points. And so what that's exactly following the guidelines from HHS. Lower income households get more points and get a higher benefit. They also add some targeting factor points. Fixed income, elderly, disabled, young children get higher points because they're vulnerable. People living in a detached dwelling get an additional point because their energy bills are likely to be higher. People who are in subsidized housing actually get negative points because in many states, those households are receiving a utility allowance as part of their housing subsidy, and so a certain share of their energy bills are already paid for. And then they have a last factor, which is fuel type, which is that for natural gas or electric, you get 4 points, and for propane or fuel oil, you get 5 points. Then the award calculation, I think John told me that for the most recent fiscal year, they were getting about $40 per point. And then there's one other thing that they had to do. If you look down at the bottom, it says the minimum benefit for liquid propane and fuel oil customers is $500. So even though they've developed a benefit matrix that assigns points, what they found from their propane and fuel oil companies is that in order to get to eliminate any delivery charges, they needed to guarantee a minimum delivery of $500. And that is something that I'm sure that states who are working with delivered fuel vendors may have come across. You may have come across that as well. But that also will influence. So, Michelle, if you go back up at least one slide, one more slide. So what you can see is that the average benefit for the propane is in fact greater than $500, which would make sense because it appears that the minimum benefit for propane households is going to be at least $500. So it's not always clear, it's not always so easy to directly go from a state's benefit matrix to really see how it is that you got to that exact payment level. But in general, I think that you can see that that natural gas and electricity are close to the same, and that's mainly because they get the same number of points. And that propane is a little higher, maybe because they get an additional point, maybe because there's a $500 minimum. Go down to the next slide, Michelle. And then the next slide. And then the next slide. So again, the factors in the Iowa benefit matrix are poverty level, fuel type, and targeting factors. Next slide. So let's just again examine how it is they get to a particular benefit level. A household with a poverty level equal to 80% would get 6 points. If this household is elderly, they get another point. If their main heating fuel is natural gas, they get 4 points. Total, add that up, you get 11 points. Their benefit is 11 points times $40 per point, $440 benefit. There's nothing wrong with that. That's perfectly straightforward and makes sense from the from the perspective of what HHS is recommending in terms of how you vary benefits. Next slide, Michelle. So again, you can see 80, poverty level of 80 would get you in the 6-point range. Elderly household would get you 1 additional point. Natural gas would get you 4 points. Next slide. So here's another sample calculation. Here's an electric. Here's the way the calculation works by the different main heating fuels. So for electric, 80% poverty level gives you 6 points. Electric main heat gives you 4 points. And we're ignoring the targeting factors right now. 10 points gets you a $400 benefit. Natural gas, 80% poverty level gets you 6 points. Natural gas main heat gets you 4 points. That's 10 total points. That's a $400 benefit. Propane, 80% poverty level gives you 6 points. Propane main heat gives you 5 points. That's 11 total points and a $440 benefit. So other things being equal, a household with electric main heat would get $400, natural gas would get $400, propane would get $440. But now next slide, Michelle. But now let's look again at what their total energy bill is. The average electric main heat household is only about $1,200. The natural gas main heat is about $1,700, and the propane is almost $2,200. Back up one slide, Michelle. Actually, no, go to the next slide. So when we look at it, we're saying, maybe you'll want to. There are 2 different ways to assign benefits in a benefit matrix, points in a benefit matrix using the main heating fuel. One is the way that Iowa did it, which was to just assign points that are additive. But another way that we've seen some grantees do it is by adding a multiplier factor. So here's an alternative benefit matrix procedure that Iowa might consider. Step 1, compute the ratio of energy expenditures by main heating fuel. So natural gas is 1.4 times electric. The total bill, average bill for natural gas is $17.11. The average bill for electric is $11.94. That's a ratio of 1.4. Propane is about 1.8 times electric. So the average energy bill is $21.81 for a propane household, $11.94 for electric. So then the next step is to go ahead and assign the assign benefit using the poverty level and targeting factors. So household 1, they're at 50% of poverty, they get 8 points. They're elderly, they get 1 point. They're detached dwelling, they get 1 point. That's 10 points or a $400 benefit. Household 2, is there any way to make that easier? No. Household 2 is 110% of poverty. That gives them 5 points. Young child, 1 point. You can't see the rest of it, Michelle. Maybe it's my own.
It says disabled, 1 point, and then that's a total of 7 points for a $280 benefit.
Perfect. There you go. So that's the core benefit that doesn't pay attention to what main heating fuel they're using. Go to the next slide. So one thing that Iowa could do is, in fact, instead of using additive points for their benefit matrix, they could use that ratio of total energy bills. So the electric main heat benefit would be, for household number 1, would be $400. The natural gas main heat benefit might be $400 times the 1.4, which gets you to $560. And the propane main heat benefit might be $400 times 1.8. That gives you to $720. Similarly, for household 2, the electric main heat benefit would be $280. The natural gas main heat benefit would be $392. The propane main heat benefit would be, is it $504 or $594, Michelle?
$504.
Thank you. So that's not necessarily the right way to do this, but it's one way of thinking about doing this, is to look at those values and to think about the ratio of the energy bills that different households are facing, and to use that kind of a procedure. Next, Michelle. I'm going to stop here and take some questions. I know that those were some detailed numbers. I know that you have the slides, so you can look them over and think about them again. And if you don't have questions today, we're very happy to have you go ahead and send us questions related to that. Michelle, you want to tell them how to go about asking a question?
Sure. So there are two ways. You can either raise your hand, and then I will let you know when I'm unmuting you so you can ask your question so we all can hear you, or you can type in your question, and both ways will get your question answered. So we'll start with those who have raised their hand. So first we have a question from Philip Garnier, and Philip, I will unmute you now.
Philip, can you? We can't hear you. Are you asking a question?
All right. You should be unmuted now, Philip.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I just hit the thing by mistake. It's all quite clear to me. Thank you.
Oh, sure. No problem. Thank you. All right. And we have another question from Heather Jones. So, Heather, I'm going to unmute you now.
David, so can we go back to the performance data form for Iowa and take a look at that? Can we get that screen back up?
Yep. Can you go back, Michelle?
Absolutely.
Because one thing I notice you're focusing on is, the targeting, which we want to look at poverty and targeted populations like elderly, disabled children. But and poverty in their benefit matrix is, ranked higher with the point system. But what I notice when you look at their actual data form, there are people who make electric, their income's lower. So how does that, if the average income for the natural gas and propane is higher than what the electric is, isn't that one of the reasons for the LIHEAP benefit for electric households needing to be higher, or because it's weighed because of their point system?
Michelle, can you go to the slide with the point system? I think it's just up one. Up two? Down one. There you go. Heather makes a really good point here. The electric households have lower income than the natural gas households, and so those households on average would be getting more points for the poverty level than the natural gas and fuel oil households. So go down to the form again. And so she's absolutely right. You're not doing, there's not an apples to apples comparison here. So the simple analysis that we did, go to the next slide, Michelle. We did this, anyway, back up to the form. We did a relatively simple analysis saying 403 is 35% of 1194, 465 is only 27% of 1711. But Heather is absolutely right that the income is higher for those households, so the benefit would be expected to be lower. So that's why. I agree with Heather on this. Is that you should do this kind of an analysis. You say what part of the bill is covered, but you should also look for what other reasons the benefit might be higher for a particular main heating fuel. Maybe the people who are, if you see one fuel that's particularly low, it could be that many of those households are in subsidized housing. And so there are negative points. They make, that makes perfect sense. One of the tricks that if you have the ability to automate generation of your performance data form, And I know that Iowa has a really smart data analyst named Greg Dahlhoff who does their work for them. He could, for example, take a look at households. He could take a look at households that are all similar and then see what the benefits are. You're absolutely right, Heather. You can't simply look at this form and make an apples-to-apples comparison about whether you're serving households correctly. You need to look at it in the context of the benefit matrix. But Michelle, go one slide up. That's why we did this slide number 18, where we said, okay, let's look at what happens if you have households that have the same characteristics. What benefit level do you give them? But then what you would also need is you would need someone like Greg to then select those kinds of households, run your performance measures form again, and see what the average bills for those households are. And given how expensive propane is in the Midwest, you're probably still going to see a pretty big difference between the propane costs and the natural gas or electric. And so we're still going to make recommendations related to that, but you need to be really careful. And the better the analyst you have, the better you'll be able to do kind of an apples-to-apples comparison to decide if you want to use that ratio approach. Go down to the questions again, Michelle. Thank you for that question, Heather. I think that was very helpful. Heather, did that answer your question, or do you want to add any other comments?
No, I think that got at my question. You know, for states who have traditionally set their benefit matrix amounts, and I'll be honest, Missouri is one of those, I don't mind saying that, we put it mainly on main heat, and if you don't include that electric, it gives you a very different perspective on this.
Okay. Yes, and that is also something that we're going to talk about in a minute, is whether you're looking at the total bill or whether you're just looking at the main heating fuel bill.
Great, thanks, Heather. And I'll mute you again, Heather, just so you're aware. And we also, it looks like we have a few typed in questions, so I'll turn that over to Kevin.
Sure. So David, we have one typed in question that asks whether we've seen an example of a benefit matrix that considers net metering credits from something like solar or community solar.
You know, it's interesting. I was on the phone this morning with Lauren Christopher and Katrina Metzler, Lauren Christopher from OCS and Katrina Metzler from the National Energy Utility and Affordability Conference, and Leon Littau was on that call as well. And the answer that Lauren gave was, we're trying to look very carefully at that. And it is this whole net metering issue is a very complicated question. If you all have examples of that, I would recommend that you send them to Lauren Christopher and Holly Raveslut, because they are trying to get their arms around that issue. And the more examples they see, the better they'll be able to react in terms of policy. Leon, you were on that call. Anything that you would like to add to that?
No, only that we were talking about solar as being a source of energy, just as wood is, or what have you, to produce heat. But that's the only thing that we really could say was it's a source of energy.
I think the simple thing that you should know is that is on the radar screen, on OCS's radar screen. It's a very hard issue. Any thoughts you have on it are welcome to OCS, and it is definitely something that we'll be looking at in the next year. I wouldn't be surprised if the clearinghouse is looking at that in the next year. I know that Holly is responsible for taking a look at it for OCS, and I think that the WAP office is also taking a look at it. So There are a lot of people looking at this issue, and I do not believe that it would be appropriate to say that there's any good answer right now. Any other questions, Kevin?
We have one other. It's just in regard to the LIHEAP poverty level maximums. I think it's in regard to the matrix for Iowa, which showed points going up to 175% of poverty. So just as a reminder, the federal maximum allows for states to set their standards at the greater of 150% of poverty or 60% of state median income. So in the case of Iowa, 175% of poverty is less than or equal to 60% of state median income.
Okay, let's move on to the next set of questions. So again, what I've done so far is I've just taken the benefit matrix example, looked at a state's performance data form, showed one thing that when you look at the form, you might say, well, maybe this isn't targeted quite as well as we would like, and then given them one way that they could change their targeting, their benefit matrix so that potentially it targets better. You know, again, it's our job to come up with, kind of present these ideas, but you're going to have to work with these in your own state, and what makes sense to one set of policymakers and to a set of policymakers in Iowa might not make sense to a set of policymakers in Missouri. Missouri. And so you're going to have to present these kinds of statistics to the decision makers and see where they want to go. But the nice thing is that you do have additional data, additional information that can be brought to bear to give them the clearest picture possible about how what the energy bills are of different households and what are some of the choices that need to be made. So the other thing that having energy bills allows you to do is to use those bills for benefit determination. So topic 3 is going to be using client energy bills for benefit determination, the introduction. Some states have been using client energy bills to set benefit levels for many years. Those states have developed some really interesting procedures. And again, once you can take a look at that clearinghouse report, and that you can see some of the different factors that they take into account as they're doing that. Most states are now collecting energy bills for clients to meet the LIHEAP performance measures reporting requirements. And states can improve their benefit targeting by making use of client energy bills to set benefits. Next slide, Michelle. So here's a basic example of how one goes about doing this. And I'll have to tell you, I couldn't figure out how to break this down into steps until I read through the benefit determination procedures for about 5 different states who do this. And they thought of a lot of things that I do not know whether I would have ever thought of. But the basic concept is, step 1, you're collecting annual energy expenditures for clients made heating fuel for FY 2017. If you're going to use that in determining a benefit, you need to decide what share of that bill is used for heating. What you saw from Iowa is that the electric bill was substantially higher than the natural gas bill for Iowa clients. But the total energy bill for natural gas households was substantially higher than the total bill for the electric main heat. So if you're going to just use the main heating fuel, and that's the simplest approach, you need to decide what share of that bill is actually used for heating. So we have prepared some census region estimates from REX. And for example, in the Northeast, for households with electric main heat, as EIA finds that 35% of the electric is used for space heating. So then in step 3, you need to develop a data table that has the client and their FY 2017 heating bill. that you could use when it's time to, if that client presents themselves for benefits again. Step 4 is you decide what share of the heating bill you can afford to pay on average by looking at the all households column of your performance data form. And then you decide whether you want to pay a larger share of the heating bill for low-income households. For example, you might be able to pay 50% on average, but you might want to pay 75% of the bill for households in the lower income group and 25% for the households in the higher income group. And then step 6, when a client applies for assistance in FY18, use their FY17 heating bill and the benefit determination formula to set a benefit level. So let's walk this through with actual numbers. Next. If you look at Iowa's form, you can see that on average they've got a $452 benefit. They've got an average of $686 heating fuel bill and a $1,600 total bill if you're looking in the all households column. If I had been smart, Michelle, I would have told you to move those red circles over to the all households column so people could see that better, but I didn't. So you can see that they're paying a little over, if you just take the average over the total, they're paying about 25%, 25 to 30% of the total bill. They're paying almost probably 2/3 of the average main heating fuel bill. But on average, they can afford to pay a benefit of about $450. Next slide, Michelle. And then the other thing you're going to have to look at is the data from your household report. You're going to have to remember, if you want to vary the benefit by the different poverty groups, you need to remember what share of the households fall into each of those poverty groups. So for Iowa, about the total isn't here, but you can see that they have 80,000 heating assistance recipients. About 27,000 of them have income under 75%. I calculated that out a little while ago, and it came to around around a third of the households. And so you're going to need to pay attention to. So go back up one slide, Michelle. You're going to need to pay attention to what's the average bill you can pay, the average benefit you can pay. The next slide. And then if you want to vary it by poverty group, you need to be focused on what share of your households fall into each poverty group. So those are two things that you're going to have to look at. But let's just go through an example calculation. So step 1, the client's electric bill for FY 2017 was $1,240. Step 2, check the table, and you'll find that 35% of the electric bill is for heat on average. And so you're computing a heating bill for that household of $434. You recorded $434 in your database for use during benefit determination. Step 4, you decide to pay on average 50% of the heating bill. You decide that for people below 75% of the poverty, you can pay 75%, 50% for the average, and then 25% for those above. And then for this client, they're at 90% of poverty, so you're paying 50%. And so you think your best estimate is that their heating bill was $434, and you pay them a benefit of $217. Next slide. Example 2 calculation. This client's propane bill was $1380. You check the table. You find that 80% of the propane bill is for heat. So you compute their heating bill from 2017, which was $1104. You record that in your database. You decide to pay on average 50% of the heating bill. This client is at 50% of poverty, so you're going to actually pay, in this case, you'll pay 75% of the client's heating bill, and the benefit will be $828. So if you go back up to the previous slide, so household number 1, you're paying $217. Household number 2, you're paying $828. Next slide. Does that kind of benefit differential make sense? Many states think so and have built procedures that do assign benefits that have that big a range. Again, I just walked through some steps for how you would go about doing that. There are a lot of subtleties in how you could do that. And one of the things to know, however, is that go back up to the Iowa slide, Michelle. Go. Okay, right there. One of the things that we find is that delivered fuels in particular are so expensive. So if you look here in the propane line, you see that the average propane bill for that household was $857, but the average electric bill for that household was $1324. And what we find is that with the big differential in cost between delivered fuels and electricity, a lot of low-income households make use of a lot of electric for supplemental heat. And you can see that for these propane households in Iowa, their average electric bill is higher than the electric bill for the electric main heat households by itself. Then when you add in the propane bill, it's, as we said before, about 80% higher. So what some people are recommending is that you look at the total bill and then try to estimate the share of that is for home energy. Go down, keep going, Michelle. Go back down to the slide we were at. So in the first example, we were just showing you how to, there you go, thank you. Good job. The first example, we were showing you how to take a heating fuel bill and to transform that into a heating amount and to assign a benefit. An alternative is to use both the main heating fuel bill and the electric bill and to decide what share of those bills are for home energy, heating and cooling. And in particular, you know, Heather's in Missouri has very high heating costs, but it also has very high cooling costs. And so one thing that they might consider is looking at is what's the home energy bill for household. And they might think about trying to understand the differential home energy bill and vary benefits to pay both heating and cooling. So we have prepared census region estimates from REX. And for example, in the Midwest, for households with natural gas, we found from EIA that they estimate that 40% of total energy expenditures are used for home energy. That's heating and cooling. So step one, you'd collect both the main heating fuel and electric bills for 2017. Step two, you decide what share of bills are used for home energy. Step three, you develop a table that includes that info. And in step three, should say their FY 2017 home energy bill, not heating bill. We'll fix that before we post it. Decide what share of the home energy bill you can afford to pay by looking at the all households column. Decide if you want to pay a larger share for lower income households. And then when a client applies for assistance, use that home energy bill and the benefit determination formula to set a benefit level. Next slide. So for in this case, again, let's just walk through what a calculation looks like. Client's natural gas and electric bill for 2017 is $1,860. You check the table, 40% is for home energy. You multiply that times the $1,860, you get $744. So what you're saying is record that in the database. This client had a 2017 home energy bill of $744. You decide to pay on average 50% of the home energy bill. This client's at 90% of poverty. You pay 50% of $744 or a benefit of $372. Next example, same kind of calculation. You're finding the client's propane and electric bill in 2017. You find out that propane, 48% of the total bill is for home energy. You multiply that times their total bill. You get $1,270. You record that in the database. You're deciding to pay on average 50% of the home energy bill. But this household has a somewhat higher income. They're at 110% of poverty. And so you're paying 25% of that bill. That's $318. In all of these cases, you're going to have to, back up, Michelle, just a minute. you're going to have to make a lot of decisions. Are you looking just at heating bills, or are you looking at home energy bills? We are going to furnish for you a table that shows you the ratio of home energy to total, heating to total, and you can make use of that. But you're going to have to decide, you're going to have to do some analysis to figure out what share of the bills you can pay, and you're going to have to make some decisions about whether you want to vary that by income level or not. I will tell you that most of the states that are doing this are varying by income level, but some are paying, some are kind of in the 25, 50, 75 range, others are in the 40, 50, 60 range. So each state is going to make a different set of decisions based on what you think is more critical. Next slide. So here are some of the things you're going to need to think about when you're, if you're going to make use of client energy bills for benefit determination. Number one, the share of an energy bill that is used for home heating or home energy is different for each type of fuel. If you're going to use energy bills to set benefits, you need to have a procedure for estimating the share that is used for the targeted purpose. Resource number one, Apprise is developing census region estimates of the share of each fuel used for heating and home energy. Resource number two, some states choose to use other procedures to estimate heating costs. For example, some states you just look at winter bills. Again, take a look at the clearinghouse report. They have identified for you some states that are doing just those things. Issue number one, sometimes grantees are concerned about encouraging clients to waste energy, and they set limits on the amount of a bill that will be paid. So, for example, if the average bill is $1,800 for people in this with this particular main heating fuel, they might say we're not going to count any dollars over something that's 50% greater than that. So if somebody's at a $4,000 energy bill, they're going to limit the amount of benefit they get. Also, some grantees are concerned about penalizing clients who are careful with energy and set a minimum benefit for those households, even if the benefit calculation would be lower than that using the formula. If you want to take a look at that, Wisconsin has worked hard on those issues, and it sets some maximums and minimums. Even they calculate a benefit, but they set maximums and minimums using their data. The other thing is that last year's bills may not be for a normal winter. Was last winter warmer than normal, and this year's will be higher? Did we have a propane crisis last year, so this year's bills will be lower? And again, Wisconsin has developed some pretty sophisticated procedures for looking at what the weather was that last year, what the weather predicted, what a normal year would be, and then also forward looking at what the energy prices are projected. So those are some things that if you decide to use this approach, you'll want to take a look at. Next slide, Michelle. And this is something I highlighted before, some clients with expensive delivered fuels may use a substantial amount of electricity for supplemental heat. If you set benefits using total energy bills for these households, the computed benefit might exceed the annual bill for the delivered fuel, and you might want to develop a procedure to make payments to electric vendors for such households. If you're interested in that, I know that Minnesota has a system whereby any household who requests it can have 2/3 of their grant go to their main heating fuel and 1/3 go to the electric. And if you're aggressive in the way you set your benefit determination procedures, you might want to automatically do that so that you don't end up with credits on the accounts of households that are using a lot of electric because the delivered fuel is so expensive. And again, if you speak to, if you talk to Minnesota, they can tell you what it took to set up that kind of a system and whether they think it's effective. Principle number 3, there are many targeting factors that grantees may want to apply to benefit determination procedures. And those factors, even just as with a benefit matrix approach, you're going to have to add those into the benefit determination formula. For example, you might want to add 5% payment percentage for vulnerable households. And number 4, even when you develop a procedure to use client energy bills, there will be some clients for whom you do not have a FY17 data. For those clients, you'll need to still develop a backup matrix. Next slide. So that's it. That's what we have to say. Any questions about using client bills to set benefits?
We do have one call-in question from Susan Marshall. So Susan, I'll unmute you now.
I don't know if it worked, Michelle.
Susan, it looks like you have to enter your audio PIN. So we can come back to your question, Susan, or feel free to type it in as well. And we have another question from Christine Taylor. So Christine, I'm going to unmute you now, and you should be unmuted, Christine.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, great. Yeah, David, you haven't discussed percent of income payment plans here. Is that because the PIP plans don't comply with statutory mandate?
No, that's actually the PIP plans are definitely approach benefit determination in a way that's consistent with the LIHEAP statute. The reason I haven't talked about PIP plans is because they are really very complicated to discuss. Most often they involve a combination of LIHEAP funds and ratepayer funds. And so if you're interested in PIP plans, what I would recommend that you do is take a look first at the clearinghouse report, where they cover some of the PIP plans that are being implemented. And I think they're going to add a couple more with their update. Or you can contact people from New Jersey, Ohio, Nevada, or Illinois, each of which have PIP plans. But no, PIP plans are definitely appropriate in that the lower the income household, the higher the benefit that they deliver. And so that would be consistent with the statutory mandate.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Christine, and I'll mute you again. And Susan, now it looks like you are you have entered your PIN, so I will unmute you now, and you should be unmuted, Susan.
Yeah, and I just typed in a little comment in that my question related to the first part of the webinar, and it's been answered since then. So thank you very much.
Great, thanks.
Thank you, Susan. Any other questions or comments?
That's
we have a
for
couple of typed in questions.
Great, thanks, Kevin.
So David, one of the typed in questions is about if you're running a year-round program, say, would your focus be more on the total energy bill rather than the main heating bill?
So I think Leon would be a good person to give this answer. The answer to the question, so that is up for the grantee to decide. You are not required to, states can choose what kind of benefits they want to offer. They could offer heating benefits only, they could offer cooling benefits only, or they could offer home energy benefits. I guess what I would recommend is if you're giving benefits throughout the year, it might be more efficient to try to look at the total energy bills and offer a one-time home energy benefit rather than offer a heating benefit in the heating season and the cooling benefit in the cooling season. That, of course, is a kind of an economically rational approach. The reality is, though, that people's heating bills are high in the winter and their cooling bills are high in the summer, and it might be more effective to give them a grant at each time. So the answer to that question is simply that each state has to make a decision on what it is that they want to pay. They need to take a look at who their households are, what their needs are, and make that decision. That's not something that we can make a real recommendation on. Leon, is that a correct statement that it's up to the state to decide what bills they're going to pay? I think we may have lost Leon.
Yeah, David,
okay.
It looks like Leon had to jump off the call.
Okay. And what's the other question, Kevin?
We have one other question just to clarify. So if you have a new client and they don't have any bill history, that's where the backup benefit matrix would come into play.
Absolutely. If you have a client and they don't have energy bills, then that's where you'd use the backup matrix. I think that some states try to make use of proxy bills. Take a look at what was used in that home in the year prior. But that is not a common approach for the states that are doing benefit determination using client bills.
That's it for the typed in questions, but I think we have a couple of raised hands, so I'll turn it back over to Michelle.
Yes, we do. So the first attendee who raised her hand is Casey Killian Latran. So Casey, I'm going to unmute you now. And you should be unmuted now, Casey.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
All right. I have two questions, and I'm going to take the answer up air after I ask. My first question is, how do you deal with the matrix for the household that use a combination of main heating, both like natural gas and electric? In Oklahoma, we have that situation, or propane with electric to heat their house. The second question I have is, as far as for the matrix for the share cost, how do you determine that the partial of the energy bill would be towards so we can pay for the heating energy?
Okay. Let me answer the first question first.
Sure.
So what Casey is saying is that what if a household heats one part of their home with propane and the other part with electric? So the first thing I would do is generally I would characterize, I would put that household into, call their main heating fuel the more expensive fuel. And that is one of the reasons why I would look at the total residential energy bill rather than just the heating bill. Because what we find is that a lot of delivered fuel households are using a significant amount of electric supplemental heat, because even though electric is expensive, it's less expensive than the propane and the fuel oil. So my recommendation is go ahead and record those households in the propane line, in the propane column. Take a look at the total energy bill for your propane households and use consider that if you don't have information for that individual household, that your best guess is the cost for propane households. So that's number one. And then number two is what share of that is for the heating or for the cooling. And again, Apprise will be publishing some tables where we use the residential energy consumption survey data to look at, for all low-income households in your geographic area, if they're a propane main heat household, what share of their total energy bills go for heating, what share go for cooling, and what is the share that goes for home energy, and then you can use that factor in setting up either your benefit matrix or your benefit determination procedure. Casey, did that answer your questions?
Yeah. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Casey.
All right, and that's it for the attendees who raised their hand.
Thank you very much for attending the webinar. Go to the next slide, Michelle. So I just want to remind you that there are some performance management resources for LIHEAP grantees, and you can get these on the performance management website. And next slide. And there's the LIHEAP Virtual Library, the LIHEAP Clearinghouse, and the ACF training resources as well. And next slide. And if you have other information requests, you can contact Melissa or Dan or Kevin, and they will answer your questions. And that's all we have for today. Thank you very much.